Board regular meeting for Monday, October 10th to order. We will note that we are providing public access to meetings, and we also are live streaming in the event someone would prefer to not attend in person but be able to watch the meeting. We will start with our meeting opening on our roll call. I'll have Carlin do the roll call and verification of quorum.
Mr. Ebel.
Here.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Tortzen.
Here.
Mr. Wade.
Here.
Ms. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Rano.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We move into public comments. I have one public comment that we received by email. It is from Kelly Teelins at 2541 Washington Avenue, Plover, Wisconsin, 54467. She is addressing 9B, which is the Kennedy student transition. I'm writing in support of the proposal to have Kennedy students attend PJs instead of Ben starting next year. The overcrowding at Ben negatively impacts students and staff across all grade levels, though, and the proposal mainly addresses the incoming 7th graders. It's a great start, but I think we can do better. Instead of giving the incoming class a choice for 3 years, I think we should send all incoming 7th graders from Kennedy to PJs starting next year, regardless of sibling status, and instead give the siblings already attending Ben Franklin the choice to move to PJs. Thank you for all that you do for our kids in our community. And then that is the only email comment? Okay. We have Michael Summers, who is going to speak on 9D, which is the HDD, Human Growth and Development Committee. Good evening.
Hello, everybody, once again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again tonight. I just want to express a few comments and a couple of questions back to the board, again, the Human Growth Development Committee. I just first want to point out a few things that I'm disappointed with. I'm first of all disappointed, all respectfully so, but disappointed with Mr. Nyman for making the comment in our public media that this is a relatively new committee and a new law. It has not been in existence since 2012. It's just that this school district has not addressed it since 2012. So I just wanted to make that comment. I was a little disappointed with that. I'm a little disappointed that after the first meeting on the 22nd, just a little more than half of the people that were selected attended that meeting. I'm disappointed with that. I guess I'm disappointed that my suggestions, my comments were largely ignored by this group and by the committee on the formation of that committee. I think the attendance of the people of that committee reflects that maybe we should have gone through a little bit better qualification and process in selecting the people, because apparently not only did they not attend, the people that were there, a lot of them didn't understand the law, didn't understand that there was a law, didn't understand much about human growth and development at all. I assure you, myself and a few of the other people that wanted to be on this committee did understand it, and so I'm a little disappointed with that. I'm also disappointed that in that first meeting, there was no public comment allowed. All of our committee meetings, including this board here, allow public comment. I think that's a good thing. We need to get the community involved. We need to show that we trust the community in listening to them. You did not allow that at the first meeting. I hope that changes. And I'm going to implore that this board maybe put some influence on the next meeting, that there is public comment. I think that is important. I certainly would like to speak and ask questions, and I think there are other people in the community who would like to do as well. So with that said, I'd like to just, again, who picked these people? They didn't show up. They didn't know anything that was going on. I think that's just a poor representation out there. I'd also like to ask the question, will the 5 tonight, you're voting on new members for this committee. 25% of the people that you voted on last time are not on this new list. So you got 5 new members. Are they going to show up? Are they going to know what's going on? I have to ask that question. Why only 2 meetings to discuss human growth and development? It's a pretty hot issue across the state, and I think it's a hot issue here. There's a lot of people talking about it. And already we've determined it's only going to be 2 meetings. Maybe that committee should decide how many meetings, and maybe the committee should decide what's going to be on the agenda for these meetings coming up. I think there's going to be a lot of things discussed, a lot of things brought up. I have a fear that 2 meetings is not going to cover it all. Despite the fact that I can't talk, at least right now, I hope that changes. I'm going to show up, and if anybody listening, live streaming tonight, anybody here tonight, I'd like you to join me at that next meeting, at least for this, as I believe is October 26th, 5 p.m. here at the Bliss Center. And I just want to invite anybody listening to join me and just show the support that we do care about this issue. We do care about the committee, and we'd like to be there and at least listen, but we'd like to speak as well. So with that said, come for yourself, hear what's going on with human growth and development. October 26th, 5 p.m. here. That's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Although we cannot provide substantive comment or response with respect to comments, I do want to note that we have our standing committees, which are formed under a board policy, and that's part of our board policies. We also have advisory committees. The Human Growth and Development Committee is formed under the advisory committees, so that for members of the community, I encourage, if you want to take a look at how that committee was set up and how those advisory committees operate within our district, that you take a look at our policies and the 2 separate policies that standing committees are formed under and advisory committees are formed under. So we will move into item 5, which is presentations, and I'm going to turn A over to Corey to introduce our new Student Senate rep for the year.
Well, we would like to welcome Adeline Johnson. She's a senior at SPASH. She's part of the Student Senate and will be joining us for all of our board meetings this year. Adeline, do you want to say a couple words about yourself? And then we'll jump right into your report, if you have one.
Sure. Well, my name is Adeline. I'm a senior at SPASH. I'm really excited for this opportunity. I'm thinking of going into government or something of that sort, and I just thought it would be really cool to kind of, hear what's going on at the local level, and especially with our school board. So I think this is a really great opportunity, and I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right, so moving into my report, just a few things. So SPASH celebrated homecoming the week of September 19th through the 23rd. So Student Senate put on a bunch of various dress-up days and lunch activities. And the Student Senate School Spirit and Bonding Committee, which I'm in charge of, is currently brainstorming ways to maximize student participation in future years. Congratulations to Kale Rolfe for earning the title Mr. SPASH for 2022, and Ava Anderson for being crowned Homecoming Queen at the annual Homecoming Pep Fest on Friday, September 23rd. It was really cool to see so many extracurricular clubs and organizations collaborate to create awesome parade floats, and a huge thank you to all of our staff for participating in activities and facilitating to make this event a success. SPASH football took on Marshfield at Gerke Field for their annual Blackout for Cancer football game on October 7th. Congrats to both teams for collaborating to support 2 women in our community currently battling breast cancer. SPASH Girls Golf is competing at the state tournament today and tomorrow after winning conference and finishing second in sectionals on October 4th. So best wishes to our golf athletes. The girls tennis team also won conference and competed at sectionals on October 5th. One of our tennis athletes, Tatum Thielman, took second place in singles and qualified for state, which will be taking place in Madison October 13th through 15th. SPASH Volleyball will take on Wisconsin Rapids at their 12th annual Dig in the Cause event this Thursday at 7 p.m. All proceeds from this event will go to the Breast Cancer Fund in association with St. Michael's Foundation. And they hope to beat last year's donation of $10,000. Juniors have the opportunity to take the PSAT next Wednesday. This exam is intended to prepare students for standardized tests And in addition, students who excel on this exam could potentially qualify for national merit scholarships. Spash choir and orchestra students are working hard to prepare for their first concerts. The first choir concert will take place on October 18th and the first orchestra concert on October 20th. And finally, there will be a winter sports parent meeting October 25th for all parents and athletes interested in participating in winter sports. This concludes the SPASH Student Senate update.
Great. Thank you, Adeline, and thanks for
Thank you.
being here.
Board members have any questions of Adeline? All right,
Lots
thanks.
going on.
Yeah.
Looking forward to having you join us for the
Yeah.
year.
Thank you. I'm
Welcome.
looking forward to being here.
All right, we'll move into the communication report. Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello, thank you. If we take a peek at the communications dashboard, just a few things I wanted to point out for everyone. I did slightly change our media coverage report. I had previously been including some of our athletics pieces. When I sorted them out, we had over 72 athletic pieces this month, which disproportionately makes it wasn't an accurate report. So I pulled all of that out. So if the numbers look a little bit different this month, that's why. I wanted to let you know, and I wanted to provide an accurate representation of what we're really truly seeing in the media outside of that athletics piece, although obviously that's very important as well. Impressions overall for all channels were up substantially during the month of September, which is not surprising given just they have more things to share on social during the school year. For the district channel itself, we saw impressions drop about 10%, which does not surprise me as things kind of even out after the back to school piece. But we did see engagements raise by almost 32%. So even though we had less of that actual kind of folks seeing that content, those who were seeing it were engaging with it more. So I'm very happy with those results for the month. For our top post performance, I do just want to point out was a piece that I talked about last month. All of our food service folks stood and took pictures with our back to school photos. So that had well over 8,000, a reach of well over 8,000 folks. So just really happy to see them get that recognition and play across social. Also, this week is National School Lunch Week. So thank you to those folks. And we're celebrating our school lunches this week. A couple other things to note on the dashboard. Outbound, we saw outbound go up, inbound come down. That is not surprising. Again, it's just reflective of less folks kind of reaching out through that channel, asking questions as school starts to get started. Those questions stop coming as much to those central channels and start going more to those individual channels. The education connection that we sent out right during the first week of school had super high engagement, 91% click-through rate. That's the highest we've ever seen. Again, I would attribute that to Corey's 90-day plan, folks being really interested in seeing that. And then our district source saw 50% engagement. Information updates outside of the communication dashboard. I was hoping to share some beautiful new website updates and mobile updates. And we recently have put that project on hold. Blackboard was purchased by Finalsite rather abruptly and very surprisingly to me. So we immediately stopped work there. I have a very long list of questions for that new vendor as they go through that transition, specifically what that product roadmap is going to look like, given that we have a lot of communication eggs, if you will, in the Blackboard dashboard. In the Blackboard basket. So as I wait to hear kind of what they're looking for, we'll either continue moving forward with the work that's been done and unveil that new site that will be with that Blackboard product, or my gut says they're probably going to want us to move to the new product anyway. And I don't want to do that work, have others do that work, and then have to do that work, have others do that work again within probably 1 to 2 years. So I apologize, but that's where that project is and wanted to let you know that. Other than that, we're continuing to focus very heavily on those recruiting efforts, both in organic and paid advertising across all social channels and a lot of our own digital. A few other events happening this week. McDill ribbon cutting will be happening on Friday, October 14th. I believe you received an invitation to that. We'll certainly be there if you're not able to be there and share out that information. And then the e-cycle event is at Ben Franklin this Saturday. That is a community favorite. If you've got some TVs, microwaves, those electronics kind of hanging around your house, I know I have 2 in my basement. I'm looking forward to having them help me recycle of properly, and all those proceeds go back to the school and programming. And that's it for me, unless there's questions.
Any questions of Sarah?
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we will move into the superintendent's report.
Last week, we celebrated Wisconsin School Board Recognition Week. So again, thank you to all the board members for their commitment to the district and its students. National Merit Scholars, congratulations to Spash Panthers Joanna Jabot and Alexander Filippi. They were named National Merit Scholars semifinalists, and Talia Moe was named a commended student. So congratulations to those students. Board member and elementary school board liaison, if board members are still interested in signing up for that, please fill out that survey that was sent to you. We're soon going to be assigning board members that are interested to schools. So we've heard from almost everybody. If you choose not to, that's fine, but we just wanted to do one more shout out. WASB Fall Regional Meeting is October 25th. Many of you have signed up with Carlin. It's at the Holiday Inn in Rothschild at 6 p.m. Project Fresh Start. The community donated over $23,000 for school supplies, and they had a record number of students receiving those supplies at 1,250. So that's just an amazing event that supports so many students in our district. So thanks to everyone that donated to Project Fresh Start. Congratulations to former SPASH student Mariah Koval for winning the Mount Vernon Prize for Excellence in Civics and History. She won actually a $5,000 cash prize. So she did a phenomenal job on a writing piece that was real personal to her about the Ukraine. And lastly, we continue to get feedback from our students, families, and staff on how we're doing. And a recent survey that was sent to respondents had indicated that 89% of those individuals said that their transition back to the school year has been excellent or good. So we're feeling good about that. They had mentioned a couple things that were of concern, and we've already addressed those concerns. So we'll continue to collect feedback from stakeholders as we transition into the rest of the year and throughout the year. That's it.
Do board members have any questions of Corey? All right, we will move into the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes the minutes of our prior school board meeting of September 12th, 2022, the minutes of our school board workshop, September 26th, 2022, approval of the scheduled monthly bills, and our employment recommendations. I'm looking for a motion to approve that consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Robbie and a second by Wade. Any discussion or questions on that motion?
I wasn't here at the last meeting. Now, should I abstain from approving those, or doesn't it make any difference? I wasn't here, so.
No, you don't have to abstain.
No.
Okay.
Could have read through them,
Yep.
asked questions.
Okay. So I will have Carlin call the roll due to the scheduled monthly bills.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Ms. Rano,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
and motion carries.
All right, thank you. We will move into item 7, which is Business Services and Human Resources Committee report, and I will turn that over to Chair Mike Wade.
Thanks, Meg. Well, we had a Business Services, Human Resources Committee meeting last Monday, and a number of items on our agenda. I do want to mention one. Dr. Owens put together a pretty good bit of information on our mill rate and our revenue limit history. So if you're not on the committee, you may want to go to the committee information and look that up. And if you have any questions about any of that, be sure to get with Dr. Owens.
And Mike, I will add, it's also on our district website. He made some even updates since the last meeting based on some
Gotcha.
recommendations, so it's on the website.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Well, our first item is item 7B, approval of bus bid and acquisition. This is typically something that the Business Services Committee looks at annually. This year, we were bidding 7 Type C, 72 passenger buses, as well as 2 Type C, 63 passenger buses. So in your board package, you have 3 bids. are three companies that were sent the bid package: Midstate Truck, Nelson's Bus Service, who did not bid, and Wisconsin Bus Service, who bid on the 7 but not on the 2 63-passenger. And so you see the results of the bid. The low bidder is Midstate Truck, and that is the recommendation of the administration. Dr. Owens, is there anything on the bus bids you would like to add?
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay.
So are there any questions of board members for Tom Owens or Mike with respect to the bus bid? Then I would be looking for a motion to approve the purchase of 7 Type C 72-passenger buses and 2 Type C 63-passenger buses from Midstate Truck Service for $780,133, the cost of which is to be paid by lease over a 6-year period in annual payments that are expected to be about $146,000 per year. Modifications to the bid or interest amount are allowed.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Scott and a second by Jen. Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
And our next item is 7C, which is an informational report on the third Friday enrollment count. We didn't discuss this in our committee meeting, so I'm sure Dr. Owens would.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. The data wasn't available at the time of our meeting, but it since has become available, and so I wanted to share it with you, as we usually do this time of year. I'm happy to report that our enrollment is up. We're talking about the third Friday count, and one thing I'd just like to clarify, sometimes it gets confusing. When we take a count on third Friday, we are actually looking for 3 numbers. That's how it gets kind of confusing. There's what we call enrollment, or the seat count. That's the students in the seat at the time of the count, or the day before, or the sometime after if they show up subsequently. Maybe they were sick that day or something. But that's called enrollment. That's a seat count. And this year, that was 7,018 students, and that was up 51. Okay? Then there's a thing called membership, and that addresses the students who are members of the school district by residency, because not everybody in the seat is a resident of this district. They may open enroll in. So that's what we do then. We adjust for students who are open enrolled in, take them out, take the open enrollees in, and adjust it out. That count is 7,250. We're up 14. Then there's the FTE membership. FTE means full-time equivalency, because some students are not counted full-time. They might be part-time students, summer school, well, that doesn't get counted in this, but they could be part-time students, for example, that would make up that count. So that comes in at 7,035, or an increase of 18. So overall, all 3 categories increased this year. So that was good. In the back of my memo, you'll see some charts. And what's interesting about that is if you look at the middle one under third Friday membership counts there, you'll see that although we have had some upturns, the trend had been generally a declining enrollment for a number of years. We might have had a correction to that, but generally speaking, it's a decline. The last 2 years have seen increases. If we get one more year of an increase, we will have an upward trend. We need 3 years to actually to declare we have a trend, but 2 years increase is good. They're not huge increases, like I say, 51 students, but going up is better than the other direction. So I just wanted to point that out. Open enrollment, This year, we had 181 students enroll in and 431 out. That means the ratio, that's a number I like to create to kind of factor in what the ratio between those two are. For example, 2.4 means that for every one student coming in, 2.4 are going out, et cetera. A ratio of 2.4, 2.3 especially or less is really pretty good for us, et cetera. 2.4 is just about a break even in terms of cost, a 2.4 ratio. So even though there are more students going out than coming in, we spend less for the student coming out and we get more for the student coming in. So money-wise, it's about a wash in that case. So, but that's interesting anyway to see that go. Some years have been better, some years have been worse, but for the last several years, we've been trending pretty well. The overall trend for the last 10 years is a ratio of 2.6. This year it's 2.4, so we're tightening that. And if you look at the numbers there, if you go back just maybe five years or so, or we start at 2.7 and it goes down to 2.4, those are going to be a little tighter, but we're still hanging right around that same number. So overall, it was a pretty good indication. The gap is narrowing. You can see that also in this graph that I created in open enrollment in the bottom corner. If you look at the far end of it, there you will see that the gap is tightening a little bit. So that's a positive indicator. So I'm going to stop talking now. Do you have any questions?
Tom?
Yes, sir.
Which number of the three is the one that determines what money, what's our state
For the
fund based on?
pupil, revenue limit?
Yeah.
Oh, great question. That would be the FTE membership. That's the number that goes in with the other two to create a 3-year rolling average. And next meeting, I'll be talking about the revenue limit worksheet at the budget hearing and then at the annual meeting. But there's the 3 years that make up the revenue limit, and 1 year is taken out as this year's rolled in, and it's comparison then. Yep. Great question.
Remind me, is the number of open enrollments out a result of RVA, our online training?
No, because RVA is considered a school within our district, so those students are still ours. But to tag on to what you're asking, Barb, we're in the process of gathering more information on where kids are going, potentially why they're leaving us, as well as where our kids coming in. So we'll have more information at a later date on the specifics of that, but that's not related to RVA.
To follow along on that are there districts that are reversed, that more are coming in than going
Smaller
out?
districts.
Smaller, generally
like-
smaller districts?
Amherst, Small River, that's a very strong in. But typically, at least my experience has been typically the larger districts, they're losing to the border school districts because a lot of parents want a smaller setting, a little more, sometimes smaller class numbers. Sometimes they want their child to be be more competitive in sports, so the smaller districts sometimes attractive. So it's not unusual for our district to have more going out than in. I think it'd be similar if you talked to Wisconsin Rapids, talked to Wausau. Some of our surrounding districts, they have some programming that's a little bit different, offering something different to our parents. So, so they certainly have a stronger in, a lot of them, than out.
So I took a look at, I don't know, I think it was about 4 years ago, it was just the year prior to COVID, and the largest number of our students that were enrolling out to Tomorrow River, to Amherst. And part of that is they had the environmental charter school out there at Sunset Lake, which has been a draw. We are seeing some of those students coming back to pods, which has been really wonderful. The other district that was the second largest was Auburndale. And again, as Dennis was saying, It makes sense. We've got population out near Junction City, out in that rural area. A lot of those families that, again, that's a school, that's a smaller school, it's a K through 12, pre-K through 12. They may be working in Marshfield, it just may be more convenient. But, at the time, those were the two that we were seeing a bulk of our numbers going to. And then there were just a lot of just one-off, few here and there. So, but Corey and Chris are going to take a look at that, put it together in a report, and bring it back to the board so we have the specifics of what we're seeing with respect to the numbers for this year.
Dennis?
Just talk about a little advantage as far as we're looking at, because we want more scholars to come back or to enroll into our district. Every district is fighting for scholars, because scholars, along with scholars comes dollars. But the advantage we have in Stevens Point is we have the resources and the numbers that we can offer. If you go to SPASH, I mean, the range of offerings, or our junior highs, the range of offerings, and even some of the services and support we have in our elementary buildings, you can't compete with that in a smaller district because you don't have the resources to do that. So really, as we look going forward in terms of what we're going to be more competitive, it's to enhance those and to make people aware of what kind of education and services they can have through our district. You have students graduating from SPASH who already have the first year or two of college credits already accomplished, done. And some of our smaller districts can do that, but it's a lot more difficult for them to do that because of numbers again. So we have a lot of things in our district that if we maximize, we can be much more competitive in terms of drawing some of those people back. And I know that's probably what the administration will look at over the course of time.
Great.
Any other questions on this report? Thank you, Tom. All right. So we are moving into Ed Services, and I am going to, G was not able to be physically present at the meeting, although he did, he was remote, but he had Chris chair it, so I will turn this portion of the meeting over to Chris.
Thanks, Meg. Educational Services met on October 3rd, and one of the first items we had was item 9B, the Kennedy sixth grade student transition. Chris, I don't know if you want to start on that.
Sure.
The number of students at PJ's and also at Ben, there was quite a bit of a difference, and there's certain some of the overcrowding contributing to different things in that, but
Sure.
the recommendation was to switch those students from going to Ben to going to PJ's.
Yes. And that's accurate, Chris. So I believe those conversations have been having long before I arrived in Stevens Point, just regarding how we best address the imbalance between the two junior high schools, between Ben Franklin and PJ Jacobs. Fairly significant imbalance at this time, which equates to about 150 students more at Ben Franklin than we currently have at PJ Jacobs. So the proposal that we discussed at Educational Services was to begin the transition in the fall of 23-24, and to begin to transition students from Kennedy, sixth grade students from Kennedy Elementary to PJ Jacobs rather than to Ben Franklin. Over the next 3-year period, we anticipate, and of course these are based on projected enrollments, so there's some margin of error included there, but we would have a balanced enrollment of approximately 750 students, both at PJ Jacobs and at Ben Franklin. So we would address some of the overcrowding that we're experiencing at Ben Franklin at this point in time. In preparation for making this transition, Corey, Jeff, and myself were able to attend faculty meetings on September 29th at Kennedy Elementary with the staff at Kennedy, at PJ Jacobs with the staff there, and the staff at Ben Franklin as well. We also held a listening session for all families at Kennedy Elementary from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock last week on Thursday, October 6th. It was well attended, and we were able to answer a lot of questions and concerns that family members had. At this point in time, over the next 3-year period, we would offer families the opportunity to not be split. So if we have a family at Kennedy now that has a current 6th grader transitioning to 7th grade, they also have potentially an 8th grader transitioning to 9th grade, we would allow them to stay at Ben Franklin, so we wouldn't require them to be split between Ben and PJ Jacobs. Over the next 3-year period, we would transition approximately 84 students, and that represents about 71 families. In an effort to support that transition, we've developed a transition or change management plan, which would allow for the Kennedy guidance counselor to begin immediately meeting with 6th grade students to answer any questions or address concerns that they might have. Also, the PJ Jacobs administrative team, counselors, and staff would visit at Kennedy. They would visit those 6th graders in the upcoming months. PJ Jacobs counseling staff would work collaboratively with staff at Kennedy to share some transition resources, a copy of course catalogs, making students more aware of what would be considered an elective, what would be considered required coursework when they arrive at PJ Jacobs. We would also arrange a site tour for all Kennedy 6th graders to PJ Jacobs in January or February is the timeline that we're currently considering. As part of that tour, Gen Connect and the administrative team over at PJ's have offered to have them included in lunch on that day. We believe we can make that work in their schedule. We also will allow for a tour or an open house for Kennedy families to visit PJ Jacobs in the evening sometime in the spring. And we also, administration is willing to provide all interested families with the opportunity to meet with us individually, any of those 71 families over the next 3-year period, to answer questions or address any student-specific needs that may need to be considered in terms of supporting them to be sure that the transition is successful. And Corey, I don't know if I've missed anything.
I don't think you have.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that was really what the conversation was at Ed Services, but I'd be happy to entertain any additional questions.
I have a question. So I've had several Kennedy families approach me, and just to share how grateful they are for the accommodations that you're allowing for the families, right? Just knowing that they have the option, I think, makes it easier, and is also a good part of the change management plan. I wasn't able to attend the listening forum. I had a technology advisory steering committee meeting. I'm curious, like, how many families attended? You said there were some concerns. Did you feel like at the end of the concerns that everything was kind of better, or do you think that people still have outstanding concerns?
There were a few questions just around square footage and capacity at both buildings that we just didn't have the information to be able to answer, but we have gathered that information, and we do plan to share that out in a communication. Aside from that, I think there were approximately maybe
I think 13
families.
Okay.
Yeah, that attended. I was going to say 12 or 13.
Okay.
It went the full hour. I feel like, we presented the information up front and then just really allowed for them to ask questions and for us to answer those questions. And then we were committed to getting them answers back with the information that we didn't have. So it went well.
Awesome. Thank
Yep.
you.
There were also a few of our teachers
Yep.
from PJ's who, actually a couple of them were Kennedy families.
Okay.
And they were teaching at PJ and their kids are at Ben. And so they were able to really talk about just the fact that they're two great schools and great opportunities there. And just point out some of the things that I really hadn't thought about, which is, right now we have one counselor at Ben, we have one at PJ's. We've got one psych at Ben, we've got one psych at PJ's. One social worker at Ben, one social worker at PJ's. And so what's happening is that the students that are in, at Ben, number-wise, potentially have less access to some of those resources. Also, it was the same with respect to, I wasn't aware, Ben has 4 lunches right now. PJ's has 3, and so there's 7th graders that have to eat with 8th graders, small numbers, which poses some challenges for kids. And some of the home ec classes, and some of the Phi-Ed classes, they're just larger classes. I mean, we as a district provide for the reading, writing, arithmetic. We provide that additional staff to, keep those class sizes manageable. But the other thing that I wasn't fully aware of is we do have an awful lot of our staff that are having to travel between buildings. which again creates inefficiencies for both staff and students in terms of scheduling. And so that ability to even out, and the families that were present, I think, were very interested in hearing that information. I won't say that everybody left happy. You know, I think that for some families, I mean, change is difficult, but I would say there were a number of families that were very excited about it. There were some families that just kind of had questions, weren't quite sure, and then there were a few families there that expressed some concern, and again,
likely.
Corey and Chris indicated they'd be reaching out to meet with them individually to talk through what their specific concerns might be. They noted to them that like right now, I mean, parents do have the ability to put in a transfer request.
Yep.
If there's unique, needs with respect to the family. Those transfer requests aren't 100% granted, but where there is a specific concern of the family, those transfer requests are granted. So.
Can I ask a question? So for the two junior highs, elementaries are assigned to those based on proximity, so a student at Bannock will always go to a certain,
Correct.
yes, P.J. Jacobs,
Yep.
maybe?
Yep.
So how did Kennedy get assigned to Ben Franklin? I guess that's just been that way for a long time?
Great
and-
question. The numbers of students, so Kennedy has the perfect number of students to transfer out of Ben and into Kennedy. Rather than picking like a school like McDill, if we were to pick McDill that has more sections at each grade level than Kennedy, it would cause just the reverse effect. We would end up having way too many students at PJ's than at McDill.
Yeah.
The other is the travel time it's like 1 mile difference to go to PJ's rather than Ben, so it's not, we don't think, going to cause significant issues with transportation.
So I think Mike's question was maybe just a little bit of historical
Right.
perspective,
Yeah.
Corey, and I don't know whether you have that. I do not.
The background.
Yeah.
Just why has Kennedy always fed into Ben versus PJ's to
Oh,
begin
that
with?
piece. Ooh,
Yeah.
that's
I-
before my time.
Yeah.
I would bet that it's because Highway 10
Proximity.
used to go pretty much direct.
Yeah, yeah,
So all the Plover schools obviously go into Ben here.
yeah,
It's really proximity.
yeah, yeah.
We don't want bus routes crossing paths and driving by one school to go to another school.
Right. And to Corey's point, McDill would be the next smallest elementary, but over the next 3-year period, that would be transferring in about 135 students. And we also know that they would drive from McDill past Ben Franklin to go to PJ. So,
Yeah.
right, it just, there's not a lot of logic there.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Do any other board members have any questions with respect to? All right, so I am looking for a motion to approve all Kennedy Elementary School 6th grade students to transition to P.J. Jacobs Junior High rather than Ben Franklin Junior High as presented.
So move.
Motion by Mike Wade, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a
And that's
second
for
by
the 20.
Jen Bushman?
23.
2020, beginning the 2023-24 year with that option for that
The accommodations,
three-year
yeah.
transition period for families. Any other questions on the motion?
Just comment, just the assurance to the families out there who still may not know, which is possible, or those who are still contemplating, if there's concerns, that even though we are moving this forward potentially, they still have every ability to come in, express their concerns.
Absolutely.
Work through
Absolutely.
problems, work through individual needs, et cetera, so that we're not closing the door to those kinds of
Yes.
conversations.
Definitely.
Any other comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion carries.
Meg, before you go to the next item, I had a few other items on the agenda. First, Karen Dosto presented the Boston School Forest Annual Report. Boston School Forest serving 4K through 12th grade with environmental and forest education, much of which is tied to the class curriculum in that. So just a few, I'll try to make this short because it was a lot of information. I had to take notes. So a few of the stats, 272 field trips so far with over 5,000 students and almost 1,000 adults attending. There were over 8,000 people who visited Boston School Forest, youth groups, clubs, volunteers, and almost $12,000 donated with 802 volunteer hours for them. Karen, I had to ask her because we had so much on the agenda to stop, but if you have any interest about some of the information from Boston School Forest, which I think is a gem for our district, feel free to go out there and take a look at it. There's a lot of information, very, very exciting. Next was the curriculum adoption cycle. They've moved to align with DPI to a 7-year cycle versus 6-year. This is where the district administration, staff, principals looks and reviews, audits the new curriculum, and in preparation, also the materials, new and relevant for students, and also best practices for teachers. So that's done each year in the different curricular areas. And last was a pilot for the Hmong Jumpstart Enrichment Program, which will be held at McKinley. The district will be working with CAPS Services and also Boys and Girls Club to support our Hmong students, some of which are struggling with their, at grade level for the literacy. So parents will be somewhat involved, and it's an attempt, it's a 4-day after-school program at McKinley, and studies include language, both English and Hmong, and cultural curriculum for Hmong students in an attempt to kind of bridge that cultural gap with students who may not be and their parents, totally involved in the English language and that. So, and again, it's a pilot program at McKinley, and it is not only for Hmong students. Other students may also join this. At the time of the committee meeting, Sam Dinga, who is in charge, mentioned that right now it's Hmong students, but other students may join in too. And that was it.
Do any board members have any questions of Chris?
I think it was Carla Lockman.
No, it's Carla Lockman. Yeah.
Oh, Carla Lockman. What did I say?
Karen.
Karen Dawson. Sorry.
Sorry.
Karen, that's how long I've
Surprised
been.
she's still working.
We all knew what you meant, Chris. We all knew what you
Sorry.
meant.
Well, and I do want to note that Carla was heavy into recruitment for the Polar Plunge.
Well, we
and I
actually
think
signed up a few people.
I think we
Like,
signed
we
up
motioned and
Corey
it
and
passed.
Chris and Jeff. I think there was conversation about that.
Yeah, I signed Jen up.
Not formal.
I think Corey indicated she'd be the cheerleader. But yeah, that's right. Carla's going to work on her.
Oh, I'll take one for the team if I have to. Now that's on record, right?
That's right. Now it's recorded, Corey. Notice I didn't.
All right, then we do have two other items that are on this part of the agenda that were not part of the committee meeting. The first is the district data trend presentation that was provided to Ed Services back in September. And Corey and Chris took that information back. They've done some updating with it and also are going to provide kind of some steps we've been involved with up to now and then steps we're moving forward on it. So I'll turn it over to them. Sure.
Thanks, Meg. And again, as Meg indicated, just a brief overview here of some data that we have coming off of COVID. And in addition to looking at current levels of performance, we also have gone back and looked at some trend data for all of the 8 federally identified groups that is disaggregated by our Department of Public Instruction for every Wisconsin school district. So we didn't conveniently choose these. These are what the DPI disaggregates data for based on our forward exam or standardized assessment. So I'm going to just begin here by talking a little bit about English language arts first. And if we look here at an 8-year trend beginning in 2014 and 2022, just for those that are viewing and have not had the opportunity to be poring over this data the way that staff in the district have over the last few months, what you're looking at here is the percentage of students that score advanced or proficient on our state forward exam in English and language arts. Along the left-hand side column there, you'll see the 8 federally identified groups that I referenced. So students that are Asian, Black, Hispanic, or Latino, students that are identified as 2 or more races. SWD stands for students that are identified with disabilities. So those would be special education students. SED stands for students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. That's a population that continues to grow or increase in our district, but also several districts in the state of Wisconsin. Multilingual, also referred to here in the Stevens Point School District as students that are ELL or ESL learners, and then white students on the bottom. So there are 2 additional categories that students can fall into when this data is disaggregated. Advanced and proficient are the 2 highest levels of performance, and proficient is what we would consider benchmark or grade level performance. The 2 lower levels of performance are considered basic or below basic. So clearly we want to see smaller numbers of students performing at basic or below basic and increased percentages of students scoring at advanced or proficient. So we're looking at this through more of an asset-based lens, and we're looking at advanced and proficient. You can do the simple math in your head and calculate the number of students that are scoring in those 2 lowest categories. So again, this is what performance looks like in 2014, and if we look ahead to now 2022, we see that in ELA, all of the federally identified groups have experienced a net loss versus a net gain. Anything in the far right-hand column that would be a net gain or growth would be colored in green. So we see a net loss for all of those. I'm going to proceed on here to math. And now that you have some context here, I'm certainly not going to talk through all of these numbers, but you know what all of the federally identified groups stand for on the left-hand side. You can see all but the exception of students that are identified as 2 or more races experienced a net loss over the last 8 years, and 2 or more races increased by just 1% of students scoring advanced or proficient.
And just to be clear, Chris, a student could be in multiple categories.
Oh,
correct?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. This is an overall percentage of, these are overall scores on our district report card. So each year, every school in our district is issued an individual building level report card. And then our district is provided with a holistic score or report card. And these trends indicate what they look like for the last 4 years. Right now, we currently have the 2022 district report card that's been recently released, but that information is still embargoed, so we're not able to share that here in terms of a holistic score. But we do see, to support some of that net loss that we saw for each of the federally identified groups over the last 8 years, we see a slight declining trend. And really the important part of this conversation and this presentation is to focus on where we end, which is the actions that we're putting in place to address and interrupt some of those performance patterns that we see here.
Chris,
Yes. Go
could
ahead,
we ask some questions
Yeah, I
before
think
you
you'll have-
launch into this?
Sure.
Have
You
some
want to go back?
Questions on the graph, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go first, G.
Go ahead.
Well, Dennis has it.
My, just a comment is this, because I know,
I'm going to stand up
there's
because I
gonna
feel
be-
like I have my back
Yeah.
to okay.
I think most people would expect that over the last 2-3 years, we'd probably see a decline because scholars were in alternative education forms. But I think this shows that there's been decline prior to COVID, that we're also declining. And then my only other question is, when you had the 8 years, if you, and I don't know, I'm sure you have the data, but does it show that for those 8 years, were we actually showing declines along the way, or was it pretty even in the last 2 years of drop? I mean, why did you choose 8 years as far as a look back?
So we actually started looking at 7 because we kind of wanted to capture some of that. So, and I would say, Dennis, to your point, I would have to go back and look at what it looked like for each one of those
That's
8
what I was
federally
wondering
identified
about, yeah.
groups. I would say, generally speaking, that there was some up and down, but for the last 2 years overall, there was a pretty significant decline for all of the 8 federally identified
So,
groups.
and that'd be the interesting information, because the up and down, that's pretty normal.
Mhm.
But if we were actually showing losses in every category along the way prior to
All
COVID.
8 years.
Prior to COVID, I mean, even if we look at the 5 year, or 5 years going back before COVID, if we looked at it and we saw that much loss along the way, it's like, that's pretty striking. I'm not quite as concerned during the last 2 years, because I have an explanation for that. But if we were declining in terms of performance over a 5 year period or a 4 year period prior to that, that is alarming to some degree.
Right. Yeah, good point. Someone else? Jen and G, I think.
If you could please go back to the ELA or the math, it would be helpful to have a data splice to understand what percentage population each of these
Sure.
federally identified, it would be, right, from a district perspective, but also I would say building perspective, right? Because it's gonna look different in every building, but I think that's another data point that would be helpful to inform what we're doing as part of next steps. And I think we talked about this, but it would be nice to see a column that represents what's the population, student population for each one of these categories.
Right, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about enrollment here in just a moment, but those individual, or those raw numbers in terms of what actual number of students are represented by each of those federally identified groups, that's the work right now that principals are really digging into with faculty. So actually examining what that looks like at each individual building, and also starting to establish some trend data around what's happening within those populations of students, right? And I think overall, and we'll get to a slide here just momentarily, that'll show you is in those marginalized populations overall, over the last 8 years, we're seeing growth.
Good.
I mean, we're seeing those groups get larger.
Okay.
Yeah, yep, more students there, right?
Chris, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First of all, what grades are tested to get this data
So this is grades 3 through 8 for ELA and math.
every year?
Yes. Yep. 3rd through 8th grade all take ELA and math. 4th grade and 8th grade also take social studies and science, and 10th grade takes social studies only.
So this is an accumulation of all the grades data?
On the district level report card, yes.
Do we have a comparison? At first, I had asked you a comparison to other school districts, but I'm wondering about Wisconsin must put out numbers for their state. And we should be able to compare directly to those.
They do, yes.
And do we, I mean, can we get that, in information either between now and the next meeting, or?
So I can tell you actually that at this point in time, based on the most recent data that we have available, in spite of seeing some very significant net losses here, we do still perform slightly above the state average in ELA. We've performed slightly below the state average in math.
And the state average is 40% respectively, right? So that's still.
I think it's 38.8 and 40.2.
Right, which is still not great.
But are the last column, the growth and loss column, that'd be what I'd be particularly interested in, is the state must have numbers for those, fairly easy to get.
We would have to, right, I'd have to go back and look, yes, at what those trends look like at the state level in terms of what those state averages are.
Could we get those at the next Ed Services meeting?
Sure.
Chris?
Yeah, that would be relatively easy to pull.
Yeah, this is a lot of information encapsulated in one number, because really there's a story to be told in terms of, how were the elementary grades in terms of, did they see that same decline, or did we see drops at middle school, high school, or vice versa? As far as your strategy and game plan for addressing these losses and performance in general, I'm sure that that's very important for you, to find out where the drop-offs were. Was it consistent, which I doubt, throughout the grade levels, or are we seeing pockets of grades where we're having more issues? Because that would imply, looking at our curriculum, looking at our practices and our best practices, et cetera. So this is interesting, but it doesn't tell the full story. There's probably more detail that you're probably much more involved in.
Absolutely, and this is very high-level data. Like, I will say, this is like 30,000-foot view.
Right.
The work that our principals do with faculties back in their building kind of gets down to that 15,000-foot view and even 5,000-foot view. And they start to have very granular conversations based on how even individual or small groups of students perform within a classroom or within a grade level. So really, the beauty of doing this work at the district level is here's what it looks like and here's what the district level data picture looks like. But now we can drill down into specific buildings, and principals can then take that one step further and even begin to look at specific grade levels and classrooms.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Chris?
Chris, we have a new math curriculum coming out. And that, I think, as I remember, we said it would be about 3 years before we really saw some results. How do you think that'll affect in the in the first year?
Actually,
Sorry
this,
about that.
Good question, Chris.
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, and there was a very big celebration around this very question just recently that was exchanged in email.
Oops, sorry.
So this is all preliminary data, and as all of you know in this room, we are currently in the process of conducting our beginning of the year screening for both ELA and math. That window is open through this Friday, so October 14th. So I'm cautious about celebrating too much, but our early indications show that we have seen an increased percentage of students scoring at the highest 2 levels of performance on our FastBridge screeners in math.
Great.
For incoming 10th graders, if we compare that to last year. Now, granted, it's a different group of students,
Right.
but a fairly significant increase in the percentage of students scoring in those 2 highest levels on FastBridge in the area of math in particular. And we also are seeing a decrease in the percentage of students with grades as D or F.
Oh, that's great.
So really developing some processes and procedures that allow us to triangulate data and really look at multiple sources. So looking at grades, also looking at our universal screening data, and also, of course, factoring in our standardized assessments that we take at all
Okay,
levels.
great, thanks.
We were so thrilled to
Good
see
to hear.
that, Chris, because it's been tough. It's been tough on kids and it's been tough on staff. A new program is
I
a
know.
lot of work.
I actually was worried
Yep.
when you said it was going to be, maybe a 3-year. And I know in the years,
Yep.
math has been not only here, but in many places. And I kept thinking, isn't there some district somewhere who's got the answer? And it changes
It
all the
does.
time. So that's great. Great to
And
hear.
I think it was very timely because to Corey's point, sometimes when we are in the early stages of a resource implementation, it makes teachers feel very unsure,
Sure.
potentially questioning their effectiveness.
Right.
So I think this was really positive affirmation for us to see
That's
some
great.
of those increases
Good to hear.
this early on.
One thing to think about that there was a secondary program, 7 through 12.
Yep.
So really, the only kids that are gonna get tested are the 7th, 8th grade, and 10th grade,
Correct.
right? So that might have a minimal effect on the overall data because 1st through 6th grade,
Right.
are not exposed to that new program. So I think it'd be good to remember that. But also, I wanted to ask, I remember when I was teaching, these tests would last for maybe 3 years or so, and then they were purposely redone because you get some kind of a test, you get used to the test, and the scores would rise, and then they would change the test, so purposely the scores would come down. Did we hit that cycle in this year? I'm wondering, is this a new test in which the scores are designed to be lower than the previous year?
And so the cycle that you're referencing is the changes or the updates that typically come to questions that are asked on the forward exam or any standardized assessment are aligned with revisions to any standards. So if there's a revision to math standards or ELA standards, questions may be rewritten to more to create more parallels or more alignment between those standards revisions. So there is, in some instances, an increased level of rigor that's associated with those revisions to the test. I don't know, G, whether or not this is one of those years. I don't know the answer to that question.
I
Corey,
don't
do you
either,
know?
G.
Good question, though. So there is the 4-year performance, and again, very soon, about mid-November, when the district and school report cards are publicly released, we'll be able to add a 5th year to that, so we'll be able to see if we're in a 5th year of a decline or perhaps a slight uptick, so keep your fingers crossed. Even though we're seeing some significant net losses over the trend that we're looking at here, there's been a lot of really incredible work that's been happening here in the Stevens Point School District to address the very specific and unique learning needs of students. So even though this is not year 1 of a resource implementation at elementary, we did implement new math resources at elementary fairly recently. So that is a change that certainly has occurred in the last 7 years. Implementation of universal screening. Right now we're currently using FastBridge as our universal screener for ELA and for math. Prior to that, we used AimsWeb, which were administered 3 times per year. Also, the implementation of Nurtured Heart, supporting SEL and character education. We also have revised our multi-level systems of support, which is what MLSS stands for there, the handbook and framework to support students. The referendum in 2018, which certainly supported a lot of physical updates to our buildings and structures. Implementation of a 6-day rotational schedule, which provided those uninterrupted blocks of learning time, particularly around ELA, math, social studies, and science. Added an intervention and enrichment block to the daily schedule at K6, and one-to-one access for personal technology devices, and that was across all elementary, junior high, and secondary sites. So in spite of all that work, I think we acknowledge here in terms of establishing what our baseline is, effort is not the same as impact, right? So everyone's working really hard. We all acknowledge that. And we know we can't ask people to work harder. It's not possible. But we do need to really develop some systems and processes that allow us to keep our eye on the outcome and the results that we're getting. And we're hoping that this work, even though this is a difficult conversation, and even though this is difficult data to look at, because we see some unfavorable trends, we wholeheartedly believe that the first step in interrupting them and changing them is acknowledging them. So even though I realize that this isn't always the most comfortable conversation to lead, and I've met it multiple times with multiple different stakeholders across the district, I know it's important work. And we can't change if we don't acknowledge what our current reality is. A couple of other things that I just want to point out related to enrollment, and Tom referenced this earlier. We see a slight increase here, an uptick of about 51 students in 2022. This actually tracks more than a 7 or 8 year trend. This is 14 years. It goes all the way back to 2007. I did include 2 additional lines here because I feel like they're noteworthy and they are a valid part of this conversation. The teal line running across is non-socioeconomically disadvantaged students. The black line running along the bottom of this chart is economically disadvantaged students. So what we see is the percentage or the number of students that are considered economically disadvantaged in black continues to go up. And of course that means that the number of students that are non-economically disadvantaged continues to decline. So we continue to see that trend kind of moving that way. If we look at all of the federally identified groups, excluding white, we see growth in each one of those areas. Some significant growth in some, so students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged and students with disabilities. That's where our greatest growth seems to be occurring. So that is where we're spending a great deal of time with our building leadership to really focus on how do we address the outcomes and the results of teaching and learning for those particular identified groups. And those are 2 that have risen to the top very early on in the conversations. Principals right now, until the end of October, are in the process of developing their individual continuous improvement plans for their building. They're involving teachers in those conversations. They're looking at, yes, what our district level data looks like, but then what does this look like at Bannock? What does this look like at Ben Franklin? What does this look like at McDill? And what actions can we say we all commit to say that we're going to interrupt this pattern? And we're going to address the needs of some of the underperformance we've seen for these groups. This is just a very nice visual that I think really illustrates the change in demographic that we're seeing. Along the top, all of those colored bars, so the dark blue, the purple, the hunter green, the teal green, and the orange, that represents all of the federally identified groups that would be considered minority by ethnicity. So what this graph doesn't include is students with disabilities or students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. So the blue along the bottom, that's kind of trending down as we move right, those are white students. And all of the students that would be considered by minority by ethnicity are those along the top, and we see those groups getting larger. So it just demonstrates a shift in the demographic in our district. And our need to really be aware of the underperformance that has existed for some of those groups. And I guess it's a call to action for us to really become more aware of how we address those specific needs. And it begs the question, what are we missing? Yeah, and that's the work that principals are leading with their teams back in buildings. This shows the increase of those federally identified groups from 24 to 22. So we see some significant increases there. And I think that leads us to kind of the now so what, which is the most important part of the conversation, right? So we can certainly spend a lot of time admiring the data, and that's not what we intend to do here, but we do want to talk about what does this mean, and what are we going to put into action? So in doing this and in taking a hard look at some difficult data, we identify some truths. We serve to exist all children, and some children are not making progress. We have to own that and acknowledge that. Whether that's a result of COVID, whether some of those trends existed prior, that's the current reality. We have students who are being and who have been historically underserved. And that's a hard reality because no one has done that intentionally. No one has shown up in their classroom or in their building any day saying, I want to do a crummy job. Nobody's doing that. Everybody's working really hard. And we've probably never really drilled down and looked at data to this degree. But I think COVID has prompted a lot of change, and this just happens to be one of them. And it's a call to action to systemize some of this work. By naming our inequities to improve efforts, we are acknowledging a persistent gap, some of those that we've just taken some time to look at. And by naming this gap, we take responsibility, right? Nobody can unhear this. Nobody can unsee this, right? I can't either. So that means we begin the work and we do the hard work and we continue to monitor the progress and we continue to monitor the outcomes and results that we're getting. So this really is a commitment to action moving forward. Some of that commitment to action is reflected here in terms of what's been done already. And the last, which is a live link there, links you to the continuous improvement planning template, which we're using at our junior high, elementary, and secondary levels. And all principals are leading this work and conversations back at buildings. But we've also added academic interventionists at all of our elementary buildings this year. That's brand new. And recognizing that those positions are new, we certainly will report on outcomes and results of that work in the upcoming months, probably when we get closer to spring, and certainly would like to invite a few of them in to share what they've been able to accomplish. Collaboration with community partners to provide on-site counseling services, and I have a list of all of those counseling services that we currently are providing in our buildings. Additional student services staff, guidance counselors, increased reading teacher support, and then again, the link to the continuous improvement planning template. So some really incredible work that's been happening, and I'll tell you from an outsider's perspective, heading into month 4 here, I have been nothing short of inspired by the commitment that staff and principals have in this district to do this work. And even though hearing this information has been difficult for those that have been here for a very long time, they're very willing to roll up their sleeves, and they're willing to do the hard work, and they're willing to do the heavy lifting in terms of what have we been missing. So that's been very inspirational for me. But I'm happy to entertain questions. And I know we just kind of
Can you
stopped
flip
as we
that
went
back
through.
up again, that last
Sure.
slide? When you say additional student services staff like school guidance counselors, do we have more school guidance counselors at each school now than we did last year?
So there was an increase of 0.7. So we increased at both McDill and at McKinley. So there was 0.5 of an increase at McDill. So McDill went from a half-time counselor up to full-time. And we also increased 0.2, which was a social worker at McKinley. That 0.2 also provides some additional supports to other elementary sites in the district.
And when you say increased reading teacher support, what does that mean?
So because of increased need at buildings, we increased at Bannock, and we also increased at McDill by 0.25. So both of those reading positions went from 0.75 to 1.0.
Okay. Thank you.
In case you need to hear me again.
And then how did you determine where you were going to allocate the additional school guidance counselors? Like, how did you determine that?
So those are part of a formula that come out of student services, and it's based on increased student needs. In many instances, Caleb and his team are analyzing behavior needs at a particular building. In some instances, we factor in special education supports that might be part of a child's 504 or IEP. So that's formula driven to a degree in terms of how we make those decisions.
I want to thank you for that report and also for the time put into the presentation. I'm glad that you mentioned acknowledging the issue, because so often everything's great, everything's great. We don't, if it's always great, then we we perpetuate the issues that aren't so great. So I'm glad you acknowledge it. Also glad that you acknowledge our hardworking staff. I think in every building, at every grade level, we have excellent staff in this district. So I'm guessing that as we're moving forward and you come up with plans and maybe modified plans based upon data, et cetera, but the things we'll have to look at is the curriculum. Do they have the resources available? Are we focusing on the right objectives? Do they have time for planning and all those things? Because we do have, we know that we have great kids in this district, supportive parents, and excellent administration and education. So there are other factors, though, that we have to look at and determine how we're going to massage those that we get the impact that we do. The other thing I want to say is just a reinforcement to our teachers that if we change these strategies, if we come up with a plan and we fall short, that's not necessarily on them either. If we have to go through and then we do a different plan. Just like that's how you get better, and that's how we achieve is you're willing to modify and also willing to take chances and not be so afraid that everyone's looking at you. Because we should be acknowledging it, but people shouldn't feel like it's on them personally. It's everybody from administration and the board, all the way through their district in terms of impacting this. And it can be done, though.
Right, and I think, that's been my message, and that certainly has been Jeff's message as we've been working through principles. This is about, data as a flashlight, not a hammer.
Right.
Right,
Yeah,
so
right.
it really
Yeah.
provides us with the insight we need to be able to make informed decisions moving forward.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about the on-site counseling? I know that's just evolved with our district over a number of years, and I'm wondering if you can, again, just provide that update to the board about what are we doing? Who's coming in? How are things being managed? Do we have families, kids taking advantage of the opportunities? And how do we see us moving forward with that?
Yeah, so we certainly have families participating, and almost to the degree that it's more than we have personnel capacity to be able to support in some buildings. So we currently have partnerships, community partnerships with 6 community partners that are providing counseling services in our buildings. So Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, New Directions Counseling, Focusing on Success, Aspira St. Michael's Hospital, Advocate Psychotherapy, and Brighter Horizon. So all of those are currently providing us with staff in buildings to provide social emotional learning supports for students. And in many instances, in many buildings, we've already reached capacity. So the plan moving forward would be obviously to maintain what we currently have, but look at what options might exist to expand that if that were ever necessary.
Okay, thank you. Do board members have any other questions with respect to the report? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice job, Chris.
We will move into item D, which is the Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee, and I'll turn that over to Chris and Corey.
Sure. And this is a couple of changes and revisions to the Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee. And I know that we had talked when we made the initial approval back in September that there could potentially be a change to the advisory committee if we had someone who was not willing to participate anymore. And that was a bit short-sighted on my part because certainly there are other circumstances which might result in a change. One of them was a clergyman that we had who is part of a larger parish and he was identified to be part of the Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee, working with someone else in his parish, also a clergyman, who is a youth pastor, just indicated that this work might be more aligned with his role within the parish, and thought that he might be a better fit. So through some collaborative conversations with our Director of Secondary Education, Jeff Milsna, made that substitute and recommended that he actually sit in and take over his role. So one substitution there, we've substituted David Hansen, who was approved originally back in September, with Justin Armstrong, who's a youth minister from the same parish, from Woodlands Church, Community Church. So that is a change. We also had the recommendation from one board member to add an additional student, a male student. And in adding that male student, we just lost sight of the fact that that put us over by 1% in terms of student representation. And there's a lot of balancing that has to happen within the makeup of this Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee. So I spoke to one student that was just randomly selected and asked if she would be willing to step down from her role. She was more than happy to accept my offer. And that was a change also including both Jeff and I as voting members of the committee. So those are the changes that we're proposing be approved prior to our meeting on October 26th.
Yes. Right.
Do board members have any questions with respect to the revised, updated list?
I do. I have a question. So with respect to the public comment earlier regarding public comments not being available at the committee, at the advisory committee, is that something that's possible, or what is our policy with allowing the public to comment on?
I can speak. In the past, for advisory committees, we've not generally had public comment. We've allowed for public comment at our standing committees, but not advisory. So this is following past practice.
Do we have a policy that specifies that we don't allow it, or is that just preference of administration?
It's just practice.
Past practice.
Is what we
Okay.
followed.
So I would, request that we look into that, given that, this is a topic that a lot of people feel very strongly about or want to provide input in a public input forum. So given that it's not, it's an advisory committee on one particular topic that we do allow the public to comment, should they feel the need to. I'd like you to just, please consider that.
I would like to point out.
I will note that any recommendations from this advisory committee will be coming forward to the Ed Services
Correct.
Committee as well as to the board.
Correct.
At both of those times, there will be opportunity for the public to provide input. Many of our advisory committees are in-house. They happen throughout the, during the school day. There are, like our long-range planning, strategic planning. The concept behind it is we are inviting public participation on those committees. And so historically, it has not been public comment because public comment is typically designed to be directed towards elected representatives. And there are no elected representatives on that committee. Chris is an ex officio non-voting member on the committee, but she does not have a vote on that committee.
As of today's vote, correct? With this updated list.
And not giving any information or,
Right.
And really, I asked to be on that just to get the information, because I don't have a lot of information about that. So for me, it was like, I'd like to be a part of it, just to be able to understand all of the things that are included in there. So that's not gonna, I don't need to vote or anything or bring back information.
Any other questions or comments with respect to the slate?
Was one of the requirements that school employees could not exceed 25%?
Yes,
That's correct.
So if we have 22 members, so if we have 3 staff and 2 administrators, that's 5, that's over.
It's 23%. Yep, so we're just under.
Okay, all right, sorry.
No, that's okay. I had to do that quick math in my head again. Now I'm questioning myself here. Right.
So what you're saying with comment, the advisory committee will work out a plan to include public comment? Is that what you're saying here?
No, what I said generally for advisory committees, our past practice has not been to allow for public comment because it will come before the board at a later date where in fact they will be able to provide public comment on the agenda. It's really a working committee that's just advisory in nature to the proposal that will come before the board. It's really not up to the committee to make that determination.
So it's a matter of a principle, or I know you're saying you only want to subject elected officials to public comment, but yeah, I guess I don't, I know the distinction that you're making, but I still have the question of why wouldn't we allow that?
So you have a question of what? Why we would allow it or why we
Why
would
we
not?
wouldn't allow public comment at the advisory committee? And I understand the distinction. Probably I agree with the distinction, but still, Chris.
And I've been on it over the years, we had facilities, committees, advisories, and that. One of the things is, and we've set this up, I believe now they're an hour and a half meeting. Anyone is welcome to come to the meeting, the advisory. If they have questions or ideas or suggestions, they can always forward those to the board because they're coming back here. But you need to have time to allow that committee to look at all the information, to see what they need to, you know, what are we looking for from that advisory committee? And to have people, they don't even know what we'll be discussing or what information is there. I think it's preliminary to have comments before they even get to do the work that they're being asked to do. And that's just my opinion.
I see your point.
And I think, just because I know this was raised earlier, just around the number of committee meetings that we've laid out on the timeline, we've really established that there would be a minimum of 3, not 2, which was referenced earlier, and with the caveat that if additional meetings are needed, that the committee would have the opportunity to add additional
You answered my
meetings
next
to the
question.
calendar.
I think I had that right there.
Right, so we have established the initial 3, not 2, and we have been we've gone into this work knowing that there could certainly be a need for additional meetings, and the committee would be able to make that decision and schedule those if need be. In the spirit of accomplishing a lot of work in a short amount of time at those advisory committee meetings, in terms of public comment, I think, Jeff and I are always really aware when we develop those agendas for those meetings that we're asking this committee to review a significant amount of content for a significant number of courses over the next several months. And really that 90 minutes is packed full of work that we need them to do. That is a considerable amount of heavy lifting. So I would really feel terrible if I took the first 20 to 30 minutes of their work time to hear public comment that may or may not necessarily even be related to the work that we're going to do that night. So that's just, I think, another element to consider. I wholeheartedly believe that there should be comment available once we have decisions made based on what we will bring to the board and committee for approval. Dennis, go ahead.
Just want to commend the administration for taking head on the fact that we weren't quite up to snuff with how this particular committee was being developed, et cetera, and doing it up front and addressing people's concerns, and so I really appreciate that. I hate to agree with Chris on a regular pattern, but I think that in this particular case, the public will have an opportunity to comment, and they will be able to give the comments to the board, who ultimately will decide whether the recommendations coming down will be approved or not approved. So they'll have that opportunity in 2 of the 3 stages. So I think that is sufficient and ample and appropriate feedback. I do know that when you have lay people in a committee group trying to do the work over a short period of time, and then with lots of, like you said, other people mentioned, for some people, this is a hot topic, and those people have to have the ability to do it, without being, feeling like they're under the gun. These are volunteers as well. Let them do their work, come to the board, and then people can come and tell the board exactly what they think, and then we can make a decision based upon the recommendations and the feedback we have and our own expertise.
Any further comments or questions? Then I would be looking for a motion to approve the updated list of Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee members as presented.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Wade and second by Robbie. Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all of those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. We will move into, now I've probably lost track of where I'm at.
Oh, it's the WSB
General,
Board of
WASB Board of Directors. The Region 5 representative election. We have that election that's going to be happening at the Region 5 meeting at the end of this month. I know a number of us are planning to attend. At our last meeting, we approved Jen Bushman we nominated her to be a member of the WASB Board of Directors, and that vote will happen at that meeting. We, as a board, get one vote. And so we wanted to bring, not assuming anything, we wanted to bring forward 2 motions with respect to that vote. The first would be to approve the SPAPSD, our school board vote to be cast for Jennifer Bushman as Region 5 representative on the WASB Board of Directors. So I'm looking for that motion. That's a motion by Dennis, second by Chris. Any discussion or questions on that motion?
Well, just thank you very much for
thank you for
stepping forward.
stepping
Thank you.
forward.
I was going to say, it would be awkward if you guys decided to pick someone up on this list. So I appreciate that.
Hasn't passed yet.
Yeah.
We've seen you sweating over there all night, Jen.
Taking a vote yet.
So, all right, any discussion or questions?
No.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. The second motion is to appoint a board member to cast the vote for Jennifer Bushman at the WASB regional meeting on October 25, 2022. I did not want to presume that the president should make that motion. I am going to be at the meeting. I am happy to make that motion on behalf of the board, or if another board member would like to do that,
Open for nomination.
speak now.
It's open for nomination.
Okay, we have an open for nomination.
I nominate Meg.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? I think I have to ask that
3 times.
3 times.
times.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? So we will close that. So I guess I'm looking for a motion to approve me, Meg Erler, to cast the vote for Jennifer Bushman at the WASB regional meeting on October 25, 2022.
So move.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions?
Just thank you for doing it. Appreciate it. Make sure you say lots of
Looking
nice stuff.
forward to it. Now, and you know, we got to have a lot of cheering going. You know, we're going to have quite a few of us up there. I think maybe we should put together some signs and stuff. So.
There you go.
Anyhow.
Some confetti.
All right. Could I have a vote on the motion? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. All right, future meeting dates and times. We have our budget hearing on October 24th. Again, we will have a public hearing at 6, and the board meeting will begin at 6:30. We have our November 14th regular school board meeting. We also wanted to bring forward the possibility of a second board EDI workshop for November 28th, and just wanted input from board members, whether that's something that we want to do in November, or if we want to wait and do that after the first of the year, we can do that as well. We just want to make sure that we're moving forward in that process. Jen, you're indicating?
I'm out of town. I mean, it's such
Okay.
a busy time
Okay.
for families, I think.
So I
think
guess
it's fine.
board is okay with us looking to reschedule that for, it's probably going to wind up being February because of the convention in January. That's a lot of board members will be attending that, as well as administration. So why don't we'll just tentatively plan to shoot for February for that.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Yep.
All right.
All right. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, Meg, one other thing, the budget hearing, you might, that, we have a 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock budget hearing, yep. That's the public hearing where the budget is presented to the public. And then we adjourn that, and then we have our board meeting, yep. So the public hearing is at 6, and then the board meeting is at 6:30 directly following.
Move to adjourn?
All right,
Second.
all right, I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.
Great.
Thank you.
Rant